Hey everyone! Today we have what I found to be a very fun conversation on what actually works in healthcare marketing between two incredible women. We had Francesca Passudetti, who currently is a senior marketing manager at ALK Canada, which is a global pharma company, as well as Tayler Hoffart, who currently is a director of growth at Empathia AI. Empathia AI is a healthcare startup that's using artificial intelligence to automate medical documentation for clinicians. This was recently recorded at the She Speaks Helath events in Toronto. Together, they explore what actually makes healthcare marketing resonate with customers, how to build trust with different types of customers, as well as the importance of partnerships and collaborations. They also go over some of the mistakes that they've made along the way. Marketing is often one of the most vital components when building or scaling any healthcare brand. And this conversation offers honest, actionable insights between two leaders who knows what works and what doesn't work in healthcare marketing. Hope you all enjoy this one.
What actually works in healthcare marketing is a bold statement for somebody who fails constantly at an early stage startup, but I love the intro. To start off, Francesca, could you tell me what good marketing looks like in such a highly regulated environment?
Yes, obviously this is a big question that is hard to answer in a couple of minutes, but I'll give my take. I think the first important clarification for healthcare marketing is that there's broadly two types of products. There's prescription products that you can only access through a prescription by a physician or a pharmacist, and then you have over-the-counter medication, which instead is something you can get off the shelf without a prescription. When it comes to prescription medication, there's a lot more regulation, and as a pharma company, we can only market with a brand to the physician, brand and disease. If we do market to the patient, we can only either talk about the brand name or about the disease, but the two cannot be connected in the same commercial. So you understand why now you're hearing all of those commercials that don't necessarily come with an explanation of what the drug is about. So when that's the setup, and that's primarily the type of products that I've been working with, not only in Canada but also outside, and I can say that Canada is one of the most regulated markets. I think you need to really build trust with the healthcare professionals who are ultimately key messengers of the product that you have, and obviously within the compliance regulation, really try and make them understand the product, believe in it, find a reason for talking about it to their patients. And one of the key ways to do that is also really understanding the patient journey and figuring out what are the pain points that the patient has. I know it's a very broad answer, but I think healthcare professionals is key. Another important aspect is that patients often are part of patient associations or other third-party organizations where you can work on relationship with them, and then, of course, equip them with the right messaging, and then they know how to tailor that message to the right audience, which is the patient. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, I think when you go to the patient directly, I think it's really important to be relevant and present where the patient is and understand what kind of content they need from an unready perspective, because they'll go and talk to the doctor, and hopefully the two connect once they meet and understand sort of what's the need there. So yeah. So can I ask you a question?
Of course.
What was your biggest mistake in the early days of building your marketing strategy, and what did it teach you?
I think one of the biggest threads that we can talk about here is trust, right? So Francesca comes from this highly regulated environment. I come from tech, where you get to play against the rules a little bit. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made was not necessarily knowing how far to go or where to push those boundaries, right? So there's times where you're like, okay, we can fudge these numbers a bit, or like these efficiency gains, or these case studies that we're sending to physicians, and all these types of things to build credibility. But is it actually going to move the line, or is it actually going to ruin trust with my physicians? One of the biggest things that I regret in my marketing journey so far is we were part of a Canada Health InfoA campaign, right? So they did an AI scribe program where they gave away 10,000 licenses to family physicians, which is incredible. That's great. We were one of the 8 vendors, and Canada Health InfoA is a federally funded company, right? So they have a lot of rules, and it's very corporate. And I wanted to play by those rules because I wanted to be a good partner to Canada Health InfoA. All of my fellow vendors didn't want to do that, right? So I played within the lines, and as a result, I lost a lot of market share outside. So there's these times where we need to think about, like, will this actually hurt trust with physicians and my audience, or will this build credibility? What at what point am I willing to kind of play in that gray zone? So if I could go back, I would definitely have been like, I'm going to market externally, I'm going to put out some ads, I'm going to be running all of these different events and all of those types of things, even though it's not necessarily sanctioned by InfoWay. And I can't go back in time, and we did still manage to, convert 30% of our dormant users. It wasn't a lost cause. We still saw a lot of gains, but we didn't see the gains that we could have. So it's very, very different, right? Where you don't have to be playing in these regulations. Nobody's going to fine you necessarily. We would have gotten a slap on the wrists. So some lessons learned, honestly. And I guess, Francesca, when it comes to pharma and all these types of things, what advice would you give any startups in the healthcare space who are looking to be with or play in the pharma?
Yeah, actually what Orchid talked about really resonated with me. So I moved to Canada a couple of years ago. Before that, I was in the global side of the organization, and my team was looking at partnering with startups to accelerate different parts of the growth, and patient journey, physician relations. So we worked a lot with health tech. And I think one of the key things that differentiated the startups I really enjoyed working with was that they didn't come with a preset pitch and talk to me about all the services that they offer. They came trying to understand what is it we actually need, and is their solution able to solve those needs. So I think the how pharma is approached sometimes needs to be thinking about them as customer and then pitching the right ideas. I think obviously also there's an element of who you approach. I think sometimes, I would get approached directly and I was the right person, but if you go, of course, this is for any kind of business, you need to find the right people and spend some time finding the right people within the organization. But even more, because I think pharma wants to sell to physicians and wants to sell to patients, if a physician comes to me and talks to me about a startup that they're really keen on me engaging with, like I will listen to them. So kind of that peer-to-peer recommendation is quite relevant. And then I think there's also an element of the when. So pharma is slow. So I think that you have to really build those relationships. It can take a while. So that's one aspect. And then the when is also, if you're developing a product and you think that you want to sell to pharma, don't wait to develop the product and then show it to them to ask them whether they will buy it. I think it's try and, to the extent that you can, that you have access to pharma, yep. Engage us early so that we can actually provide input to it. Amazing. Yeah. And I do actually have a question for you as well. So what's been the hardest lesson? It's kind of a theme. What's been the hardest lesson that you've learned trying to grow a startup in healthcare?
I promise it's not all struggle, by the way. They frame like entrepreneurship is just challenge after challenge. There are some wins. I think the biggest lesson learned for me, and I don't come from a healthcare background. I don't have a life sciences degree. I don't know a bunch of physicians. I've worked in financial services and energy and sustainability tech and all of these different facets. So when coming to Empathia, this was the first time I was selling directly to physicians. And I couldn't have anticipated how long that sales cycle would look and how important the trust piece was, right? So, I kind of thought we'll put up some paid ads, maybe we'll see some quick conversion, and that just wasn't happening, right? You're seeing people trial the product and they're scheduling 6 or 7 onboardings with my customer success team, which I just was not, I could have never prepared for that coming from financial services where it's usually quite seamless. So for me, it's like thinking about how do I build trust with physicians, whether that be through my messaging, whether that be through, different organic channels like Facebook groups, Reddit, and those types of things, whether we're throwing dinners for physicians, because really the greatest advocate for our product is physicians. It's them going to their network and saying, hey, I love this, you should try it. And there's no better marketing than that. So how do we actually create that within our business and create those customer evangelists, if you will? And I haven't quite cracked the code infinitely yet, but we're getting there, right? We're getting to those rooms, we're getting that organic spread. I think 40% of our growth comes organically or something. So we're seeing progress, but I don't think I could have prepared for what that sales cycle looked like coming from other industries. And then Francesca, what misconceptions do you have, or do startups typically have about pharma?
That we got a lot of money and we can't wait to spend it. I think that, yes, pharma often has bigger budgets than other companies, but you would be surprised about how much strategic thinking there is behind budget allocation. and how much actually proving the concept, I'm not going to use the word pilot, like it said, but proving the concept in order to scale it after is important to pharma. So I think in that context, when you're approaching pharma, besides knowing what time to approach them, meaning if you know the budget season is at a certain period, probably you want to give more time than you think you need to approach pharma. It's also how you approach it. So instead of trying to, discover the world with them, maybe identify a specific case that you can test out, identify the right people within the company that can help you with that. And I would say the last part is kind of money and resourcing. I think especially in Canada, I am the marketing department with, now I have 2 people, but it's very limited resources. So I would love to explore more health tech partnerships. I do not have the time unless it's a real priority. So I think making it easy for pharma to implement by making it simple, taking maybe more of the burden on the implementation on your side, I think can really help a lot and facilitate those sort of programs. And then lastly, how do you think about partnerships or co-marketing in the startup context?
Yeah, and I mean, it's great to hear you say that, right? To see that ALK is interested, we want to partner, we want people to be reaching out and those types of things, because for me, it's essential to have these partnerships, right? Whether that be with pharma companies, whether that be with, physician associations, whether that be with healthcare authorities and all those pieces, because that immediately gives us trust and credibility in the market. And without that, we're not able to sell to physicians, right? Immediately, a lot of questions that I get are on compliance and where's our data stored and, what does this actually look like? Are you sending it to China, et cetera, et cetera? And when you get buy-in from a company like ALK or from any large organization, they're immediately saying, we deem this safe in Canada and we want people to be using it, right? And so for me, I think something that Empathia needs to be doing is doing more partnerships like this. We did an event with ALK back in April, I think, where we co-steered a journal dinner party thing, which Empathia could never afford to do on its own, quite frankly, just because we're pre-seed. But with the help of ALK, we can reach that audience and really kind of... but sorry, I know that there's not a bunch of money, but there is some money. We can really just kind of push the boundaries on what's possible for both pharma as well as for startups in the space. I think it's a really good counterpoint, right? Seeing how pharma works in comparison to the entrepreneurial space and just so much opportunity for partnership between the two.
Yeah, and thanks so much for inviting me with the pharma point of view, because I love to always get involved with the health tech world and hearing it firsthand. So thanks so much, Aman.
All right, can we give the 2 lovely ladies a big round of applause? And we're going to open the floor to 1 or 2 questions. So if anyone is interested.
Hi. So you both mentioned that there was a lot of red tape when it comes to marketing in healthcare. What solutions did you both come up with to go around the red tape? Because it's not an easy job to try to market for healthcare. Can you give me, or if you have any solutions at all?
So for Empathia specifically, I wouldn't say there's much red tape. What is difficult is pushing the boundaries on partnerships, right? So an example that I have is we worked a lot with the American Academy of Family Physicians out of the States, so we're also in America. And to just get things done, the amount of follow-up that was needed, right? They are so happy to market to their audience, but it's going to take me 6 months to get there, and I'm going to need to use so much brain power to just keep nudging in order to get there, right? So I think making sure that you're keeping on top of all of these partnerships that you're securing and knowing that they're very busy. Because to Francesca's point, there's they don't want any friction. If there's friction, they don't want to do it. They don't really benefit, right? So that would be my advice, because I can kind of put whatever I want on an ad. That's fine. But what does matter is which channels am I using and how am I leveraging them?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that I am the master of figuring it out. I think you do want to be compliant because, of course, there's many reasons why, and I think one of them is trust building. When it comes to then the execution, I think there's a few ways that we look at that. So, for example, we work a lot more with the medical teams because the medical teams are allowed to talk a lot more about, if they're asked an off-label question, I as a commercial person cannot answer, but they can actually, inform the physician because it's their duty to give them the right information. So when I was talking about trust building, it's a lot of kind of clinical exchange. facilitating peer-to-peer conversations, because physicians can talk to each other about that. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the ways to go about it. So cross-functional collaboration with other departments, and then enabling them to speak to each other. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just want to make a point of what I'm hearing a lot is that human connection is really important when it comes to healthcare marketing. Human connection, creating an environment of credibility and trust is what I'm personally hearing are the key themes. Ladies up here, going once. Oh, all right. We got one over there.
Hi, nice meeting you. Thank you for the talk. So I'm just thinking of what the previous speaker said about where patient coordination comes in, because what you said was a very B2C strategy, and you are both mentioning going from your product, going through the physician to the patient. So I'm just wondering in which part of this whole, let's call it the sales funnel, does the patient coordination actually come in?
So I would say with Empathia right now, this is something that we've talked a lot about, is the patient education piece, right? Because if patients are pushing for this type of technology in the physician room, it becomes a lot more accepted. I would say we're still at such a steep learning curve, well, not a steep learning curve, but there's like a big enough learning curve with physicians that we haven't had the resources. So, we put up a patient FAQ in different, walk-in clinics and those types of things. And we give physicians a little bit of education on how to talk to patients about AI and what that looks like. But we're not marketing directly to patients at this point. And quite frankly, they're not our buyers, right? So as long as they're comfortable with the technology in the room, they're not as relevant from my sales funnel perspective. Still important, don't get me wrong, and we need to make sure that there's comfort with AI and making sure that they're not saying, no, I don't want this recording me, but it's not a primary target audience for me at this point.
If I understand also your question correctly, is around patient coordination sort of on medication, or because one of the things that we do in pharma, not everybody, but many companies do, is to ensure that the patient has a positive experience on the product. So post-prescription, as companies, we can invest in either in-house or partner patient support programs where we have sort of care coordinators that reach out to the patients, make sure that they're doing fine. And so after the prescription, that's something that is allowed, and that is often a big investment for companies.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add, the patient experience is one of the perks of adding an AI medical scribe or an AI medical assistant, right? So the entire point is that the physician is no longer taking notes, they're focusing on the patient during your interaction. So that, it's very innate in the experience, and of course we want the patient to feel valued, but it should be a byproduct of the tool.
All right, thank you so much. Can we get one last big round of applause?
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for listening. As a reminder, this podcast was recorded in front of a live audience at our She Speaks Health event in downtown Toronto. Scalpels and Spreadsheets covers the latest in healthcare innovation through events, media, and podcasting. The best place to check us out is our LinkedIn page, which is Scalpels and Spreadsheets, or our company website, scalpelsandspreadsheets.com. We'll see you at the next one.